One could say that Troyka's self-titled 1970 cotillion opus came out of left field. But that wouldn't do it justice. The album really belongs on its own planet. Though there are elements of hard rock and psych that have made it a favorite among collectors, Troyka's mad concoction also stirs in folk, traditional Ukrainian music, Polish spoken word bits, prog, and even funk. And in spite of the musical aptitude required to achieve such diversity, the Edmonton, Alberta band manages to do it all with a sense of humor, including a few double entendres, underscored by horny, gruff vocals. It is quite simply a singular achievement in the annals of music history that's unlikely to ever be duplicated. Perhaps just as interestingly, Troyka is the product of a band that started out playing beat music as the Royal Family in the mid-60s, even landing a Canadian hit. In spite of how off-the-wall their music was, Troyka nearly duplicated the feat. Inspired by everything from Elvis to the Ventures and the Shadows, pre-teen Edmonton natives Ron Lukawitski and Robert Edwards began jamming together on guitar around 1960. Necessity soon inspired Lukawitski to play bass, and the two played together in a series of early 60s Edmonton teen bands, such as the Imperials and the Ortegas. Like groups throughout the world, their focus soon shifted from traditional rock and roll and instrumentals to the British invasion when the Beatles hit. The main impetus for musical change for Edwards and Lukawitski, however, was meeting local Michael Richards in late 1964. Though of Eastern European descent like the other two, Richards was actually born in England before his family migrated to Canada in 1955. Michael's father, Dr. Ted Richards, served as a Polish Army officer in World War II before escaping to Great Britain, joining the British Army in a similar capacity, and anglicizing the family name. Michael Richards, who fancied himself a guitarist, vocalist, and songwriter, may have missed the seeds of the British invasion, but he'd caught up by 1964 and was eager to find like-minded musicians to play original music. On a tip from an Edmonton band called The Strangers, Richards hooked up with Lukawitski and Edwards. Rounded out by the man who introduced the three, now ex-Stranger drummer Larry Hall. The new band, christened The Royal Family, was off and running. The fact that there wasn't much happening in Edmonton, let alone Canada, in terms of original music, played into their hands. With a repertoire composed entirely of originals, the Royal Family took off as a live attraction, and later that year released their first single, Don't You Even Want to Know, backed with I Told a Lie.
Still thinking of only me. Well, I told a lie to her, yes I did. I told a lie to her, yes I did. Told her I was home, and I promised her I'd phone. But she saw me walking with that girl. That's when she knew that I...
Managed by Dr. Ted Richards, the Royal Family gained a following after I Told a Lie became a Canadian hit, and expanded their bookings beyond local venues, such as the Jubilee Auditorium and the Banff Centre of Fine Arts, to major events, like the 1966 Calgary Stampede, where they shared the stage with Robert Kennedy, of all people. Meanwhile, their second, as it turned out, final single, Sometimes Backed with Solitude, with Picture Sleeve, was released in 1966.
Why sit home at night, all alone, all night? Why sit in solitude, all alone, so blue? Come on now, tonight. Every night I wanna be with you. Every night there are things to do. Come on now, tonight. Want you with me, I want your love, and I want you every night. Solitude, solitude, let's stop this solitude.
Solitude later appeared on a Canadian 60s punk compilation, Nightmares from the Underworld. With fame still on their minds, the quartet moved to Montreal that same year, eventually landing on a bill at Expo 67 with The Haunted and backing up The Platters on a tour of Quebec. The latter hooked them up with Teddy Randazzo, then riding high with Little Anthony and the Imperials. Throughout 1967, the royal family split time between Montreal and New York. But in spite of recording extensively with Randazzo in New Jersey, cutting demos for Columbia, and a pending deal with Mercury, nothing panned out. And as the musical revolution swept the world, Randazzo had the royal family doing 4-part harmonies over sweetened pop arrangements, as heard on an acetate that he shopped to various labels. Edwards remarked, "The acetate is very much like the Letterman or Little Anthony. A lot of harmonies, counterparts with melody lines weaving in and out. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to pound it away and be a guitar-focused band with guttural vocals. For a group that wanted in on the revolution, it wasn't the place to be." And band and producer amicably parted ways by the end of 1967. Before leaving Randazzo, they also sacked Hall, who didn't fit in with the band's new direction. After an attempt to replace Hall with a Canadian drummer named Con Dewar didn't pan out, Richards got behind the kit, shortly before the royal family returned to Edmonton in 1968. When the association with Randazzo ended, so did the royal family, renaming the band Troyka after the Russian word for three. The trio began writing songs, building on newfound influences, such as The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, and Frank Zappa. Utilizing a state-of-the-art Ampex MM1000 recorder, they also built one of the first 8-track studios in Western Canada, Round Sound, in the basement of Dr. Ted Richards' house. After about a year of rehearsal and a few demos, Troyka was ready to lay down tracks for an album and storm the gates of the major labels again. By the summer of 1969, the album was in the can, and Richards and his girlfriend were off to New York, staying in cheap hotels and shopping the album. A call to Atlantic in August would shape Troyka's future. Richards remembers, "I got through to this A&R guy who turned out to be Shell Kagan, and I think I'd submitted the Troyka album to them. I'd gone there and given the album to the A&R guys, and I was calling back. And he goes, 'Are you the guy that sent me a tape a couple of months ago with the song Natural?' And I'm like, 'Yeah.' He says, 'Get over to my office right now. I've lost your address. I didn't know how to get in touch with you. I wanted to talk to you.' And I'm like, whoa, this sounds good." Indeed it was. Kagan raved about Richards' gruff vocal on Natural and offered the band a contract. After talking it over with his two bandmates, Lukawitski was actually with his Dutch girlfriend in Holland at the time, and his father, Richards accepted. Putting Troyka on its cotillion subsidiary, Atlantic dispatched Kagan and Gene Paul to Edmonton in late 1969 to remix the album. The change, according to band members, was not necessarily for the better. and the rather plain cover shot taken behind Dr. Ted Richards' house in the middle of winter was also not what they had in mind. Whatever qualms the three might have had about the finished product, Atlantic did get behind the album upon its early 1970 release, even listing it in display ads with Led Zeppelin II, and pushing it in radio markets such as New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Boston. And to fans, the mix is immaterial in the light of the strength of the music. Cut live, with minimal overdubs and no interference from outside producers, Troyka has an almost organic feel, careening through crunching hard rock numbers like Natural, and the seething rolling down the back road, to freeform jams like Life's Okay and Go East Young Man, Beautiful Pink Eyes, to Early Morning and Dear Margaret, Malgosia, which are more atmospheric. Richards cites Rolling Down the Back Road as a favorite. With crazed, gruff vocals, a stiff-wristed hi-hat backbeat, Edwards' insistent fuzz licks, and a cool middle section with nice walking bass by Lukawitski, it's also the favorite of many fans. And yes, it's every bit as suggestive as the title and lines, like "We opened a bottle of wine and we sure got flashed," and "We rolled through the kitchen and we rolled up the stairs" imply. Richards, on the other hand, may not be the twisted sex fiend heard on the track, but the persona works. It might surprise listeners that the drummer-vocalist's everyday speaking voice is actually quite normal. Richards recalls, "I think that's my weird sense of humor. It was something that was probably spontaneous and kind of appealed to me because it just sounded weird. It sounds like the guy singing it is some big heavy dude with tats riding a Harley. That really gruff voice I use, I just made it up because I figured, how do we get attention? And the thing of it is, it got us a record deal. Because Shell actually said, when I heard that voice, I loved it. I think part of the reason I got that gruff voice thing too is because when you're sitting there at a drum kit, there's a lot of noise. So I figured I gotta cut through it. I don't know how it all evolved. It just kind of did. It wasn't really planned." Sexual themes likewise underlie Natural, where Richards also sings roughly, and the funky berry picking, which was paired on the band's lone single. Titular implications notwithstanding, Rub-a-Dub-Dub, Troyka in a Tub isn't about sex at all, but came from a jam. The Polish-spoken words bits and Richards' opening declaration to "Go to hell, you're a bunch of bloody fools" are gratuitous additions, reflecting their heritage and countercultural stance, respectively. Richards sings a few Polish lines in the quieter, psychedelic ballad, Dear Margaret, Malgosia, a song about Edward's soon-to-be wife that also features mandolin, an instrument that pops up at various points on the album. It's followed by another stellar track, Go East Young Man, Beautiful Pink Eyes, which includes a memorable section where Edwards checks in with some gorgeous psychedelic licks, complemented nicely by Richards' roundhouse fills. Note that the title is actually Beautiful Pink Eyes. According to Richards, Atlantic somehow mixed in the title from the second unreleased Troyka album, recorded in the fall of 1969, Go East Young Man. But perhaps that isn't as odd as the title of the instrumental, which refers to getting wasted, even though Troyka never did. Richards recalls, "We were probably the straightest band in the world. We didn't play one note ever under the influence, anything other than just youthful energy. We never drank or did any of that stuff." In yet another stylistic shift, Early Morning was soft psychedelia at its very finest. Overdubbed dueling guitars mingle with triangles, wood blocks, and a regular drum set, putting Richards' image of a fairy tale type of a little European town to music. Predictably, an album with such disparate influences wasn't what the rock press wanted to hear. Whether it was critics' general distaste for progressive sounds and or that they simply didn't get the jokes, Troyka was mostly ignored. Or in the case of a review in the May 14, 1970 issue of Rolling Stone, slagged. Under the erroneous assumption that the band was Russian, Charles Perry wrote, "The vocals are clumsy and utterly spiritless. The guitar solos know not where they wend. The arrangements are strictly third-grade stuff. And the drumming, Jesus, it's like a sadistic German cuckoo clock." Audiences didn't agree when Troyka hit the road to promote the album. Already popular in their hometown of Edmonton, the trio found a similarly receptive audience at one of their first gigs on U.S. soil, a February 17, 1970 showcase at Fillmore East in New York City. Romping through the album and unreleased tracks, such as The Ukrainian Wedding and Three Mad Russians, the band got 3 standing ovations and kudos from Bill Graham himself. Building on the momentum, agent Ira Blacker, who also handled Creedence Clearwater Revival, Jethro Tull, and Canned Heat, booked them with Savoy Brown and Family on a tour of the Northeast in April 1970, garnering still more favorable response from the crowd. Shows would often feature extended jams on songs like Rolling Down the Back Road, plus Richard's stage antics, which included backflips and other crowd-pleasing acrobatics. After winning over U.S. audiences, Troyka returned to Canada for a May 23rd gig, opening for Mountain at the Electric Circus in Toronto. Before the gig, however, Edwards dropped a bombshell, or at least Margaret of first album song title fame did, threatening to leave him if he did not return home and marry her. Edwards chose the girl over the band, much to his 2 mates' chagrin. Lukawitski remembers, "I was angry at him for a while. We spent all these years, right? It was a lot of hard work. We practiced all the time. We were young. There were a lot of sacrifices. Like, we spent all our summers together practicing. So for us, that was pretty well the height of our career. And the doors were just starting to open. And then all of a sudden, he quits." After settling a lawsuit with Edwards, Troyka replaced him with Bob Styrna, who was also of Polish descent, growing up in Poland before moving to Canada at age 11 with his family in 1960. With nearly a decade of guitar playing under his belt, including an unrecorded 1969 stint with Bob Seger, Styrna was certainly no slouch. But in contrast to Troyka's free-spirited improvisational format, his playing was inspired by everything from Grand Funk Railway and Free to Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. A change of direction resulted. The new sound didn't prevent the band from continuing to seek a deal for the second album they had recorded with Edwards, however. When that didn't pan out, Troyka recorded a hard-rocking third with Styrna, which sadly also had no takers. By February 1971, it was over. All members continued to play music after Troyka, with Richards even releasing an indie album in 1980 with his band The Flames. But their work with Troyka would remain their crowning achievement. Edwards, who has since divorced Margaret and patched things up with his bandmates, and Lukawitski have even been known to jam together on Troyka songs in various live settings in recent years. After several inferior bootlegs, the 2014 Real Gone Rhino reissue finally does the album justice by presenting it in pristine sound from the original master tapes.